Welcome to Behind the Scenes. I'm your host, Hector Montalvo. This show is dedicated to asking tough questions for you, the viewers. We bring you their responses, and we let you decide. Joining us today in our studios, once again, is Donald Schwartz and Joe Ureneck. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us, Hector.
Thank you for having us again.
Donald, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, let's see. I'm a degreed electrical engineer. I served in the United States Army Security Agency from 1971 to 74 during the Vietnam War. I was an instructor stationed up at Fort Devens. I taught between 200 to 300 students on how to repair electronic equipment, and we'll leave it at that because it involved many top secret things to go along with it. But I've worked for corporations called Teledyne, Bethlehem Steel, Raytheon, Siemens Electronics, and I hold a degree in engineering. But other than that, I've lived in Pennsylvania for a while, lived in Stoughton, held certain jobs, and basically got involved in a situation with the Stoughton police where I found myself under arrest, and that was in the year 2000, and since then I've been trying to take and change the court system, because the way that I see it now, Hector, it's just terribly broken.
And Joseph?
Well, again, thanks for having us on the show, Hector. Well, I'm here in two capacities. One is as the chair of the Fatherhood Coalition, which is an advocacy group for men and fathers. Viewers can find us on the web at www.fatherhoodcoalition.org. And we have a lot of information there about the situation faced by primarily men and fathers in divorce, child custody, child support, and restraining orders. And we basically advocate for a change in legislative matters and in the courts and how men are treated in the courts. We have a lot of activities going on, and we try to get on shows like this to basically explain the problem that, as we see it, to the general populace at large. Unfortunately, as you're well aware, many people are not aware of how bad the situation is until they are thrust into it. And then it's as if they're hit by lightning because they're so shocked by the injustice that they find themselves in. I'm also, so I'm the chair of the Fatherhood Coalition. I'm also a candidate for the Governor's Council. Now, many people don't know what the Governor's Council is, so I'll just give a brief snapshot. It's a very, very important public body. There are 8 Governor's Councilors from 8 districts around the state. And these are the only people who allow the public to have a say in who will be a judge in the state courts. And so the governor will nominate somebody to be a judge. That person will have to go through the review of the Governor's Council, and the Governor's Council will either approve the person or reject the person. Unfortunately, for many years, the Governor's Council, with few exceptions, has been more of a rubber stamp than a process that thoroughly vets individuals who will become judges. So I'm, along with 2 other fathers' rights individuals, I am trying to be I'll be on the ballot on September 14th as a Republican in District 1, which is southern Massachusetts, including the Cape and the Islands. In District 2, Rich Mitchell is running for the Governor's Council, and in District 8, Mike Franco is running as Governor's Council. The District 8 is in the far west of the state. District 2 is Framingham, Natick, down to Attleboro. Rich is running as an independent, and Mike Franco is running as a Republican. Now, all 3 of us are trying to get on the council to vet the people who will be judges in the state. Recently, we had a nominee just last week. And in our view, we think he's going to be a pretty horrible judge in Middlesex Probate and Family Court. He'll probably be approved. The vote will be tomorrow. They have a hearing, and then a week later they have a vote on the nominees. I think as it looks now, only one counselor will vote against this particular nominee. But we think it's very, very important to have a real governor's council that's going to really vet the individuals who are going to become judges. So that's my task right now, is to try and get on the council first on the primary as a Republican in September 14th, and then in the general election in November.
When you say the governor's council is a rubber stamp, can you be a little bit more specific in regards to that? Because governor's council, as you stated, they're the ones responsible to vote on judges being appointed to the bench. What is the process for a governor's council? How do they
end up being rubber stamps or not? Well, I'll step back just a moment and say that before the governor's council sees a nominee, it goes before another body called the Judicial Nominating Committee. That is composed entirely of lawyers. Now, initially, that body was created by the executive order by Michael Dukakis in the 70s. And he's a Democrat, and as I said, I'm running as a Republican. He actually made the Judicial Nominating Committee he has some fairly good ideas in it. One of his ideas, a stipulation in his order, was that not more than 50% of the Judicial Nominating Committee could be lawyers. So he wasn't interested in establishing a trade group as it is now. The other idea he had in his executive order was that the nominees would be vetted locally in some sort of public, quasi-public hearings in the districts to which they would be assigned as judges. Those two stipulations are long gone. Succeeding governors have kept the executive order, but they've just done away with the best parts of the executive order. So now we have a Judicial Nominating Committee it's composed entirely of lawyers, and in fact they're not able to look at people who could be judges if they're not members of the bar. The executive order now states, as written by Governor Romney, that only members of the bar can be considered as a judge. Now, as you might be aware, the Massachusetts Constitution does not have that stipulation. So Governor Romney's executive order actually supersedes what the Constitution requires. And I think it's an illegal stipulation. But that's the current executive order. Now, once the Judicial Nominating Committee of all lawyers says, we like this nominee, they'll pass it on to the Governor's Council, and the Governor's Council will have a hearing, and they'll ask questions of the nominee, but they haven't rejected any nominees in many years. All the nominees are approved. 99.9% of the nominees are approved, and that by itself would indicate that the vetting process is sorely lacking. No thorough vetting process will approve 99.9% of the nominees.
We hear that in the Governor's Council you have attorneys made up of attorneys appointing judges. Wouldn't that be considered a conflict of interest?
Oh, absolutely, Hector. It's ridiculous. I was just thinking, it's like having engineers design everything in your home. It'd work real good, but it'd be boring as hell. I mean, engineers looking for practicality. What do attorneys look for in judges? Someone who believes in the same thing that they believe in? You know, I mean, the Constitution was not written for attorneys. It was written for the people. So I would imagine that if you want to be a judge, you have to believe in the same Constitution. And these people, again, like you said, conflict of interest, it appears they've tossed this all aside. And for Governor Romney to have signed an executive order that requires that only attorneys can be on this selection committee, that's ridiculous. Again, it's engineers design everything. It'd be boring. It'd work, but there would be very little color, very little enjoyment. If you have attorneys picking judges, you're having attorneys set the course for what the judges believe in based upon the attorneys, not based upon the people.
So if the, what can they do? What can they do to open up the system to be a little bit more fair between attorneys? I mean, isn't there somewhere in the Constitution that prohibits attorneys from even serving in a legislative branch of government or in an executive branch of government?
I believe that is the case, but as of this point, trying to get some higher up to look into this. And furthermore, if you want to complain, where do you go? You go to court. Okay, you've just walked into their playground. Do you think they're going to take and put forth a major effort to try to correct that which is wrong if there is conflict of interest. As I've stated to many people, in order to get anything done in government against a government official, the standards that they are held to are so high that short of murder or a felony, nothing's going to happen. So they're just going to whitewash this.
So what can people actually do to remove bad judges or to affect change?
Well, I've spoken before that bills of address can be used to remove a judge, but as Joe and myself know, that once you submit it to the attorney congregation on Beacon Hill, nothing is going to happen. But there is also the initiative petition article, Article 48 of the Massachusetts Constitution. But in just reading it over recently, I realized that the amendment is unconstitutional.
Really?
It is unconstitutional in the fact that if you submit an initiative petition, you have to submit it to the Attorney General, and they have to approve it. Tell me, Hector, if they're wrong, how do you fight them? Where do you go to fight them? In court? Okay, very good. Secondly, if the Massachusetts Attorney General approves the initiative petition, the general court has a bite at it, and they can take and change the wording, they can change the intent of it. So your words, Hector, or Joe's words, can now be changed. Now, if it's submitted and the initiative petition is voted on, the general court gets it back again, and they may not pass it. So all the work that you have done, all the money that you've spent, could actually just be flushed down the toilet. And the one thing that really croaks me is that under the initiative petition, judges are specifically exempted from the initiative petition. Now, what's strange about that is that...
I'm sorry, is that saying that judges are immune? Do they have immunity?
Yes, you cannot take and submit an initiative petition for the removal of a judge. You have to use the bill of address that goes into the State House, to the politicians. The people don't have a say on their judges. They're not electable. The only place that you can touch a public servant is like with an election, a governor, or a state representative or a state senator. But with a judge, you have to go through these elected officials in order to have a judge removed. The people have no say directly on the judge. That is patently unconstitutional. It is so bizarre. But the one thing about the initiative petition, the Article 48, it does not address our rights under the Declaration of Rights. It doesn't say that Article 4 or Article 5 or Article 6 or Article 7 of the Declaration of Rights have now been banned. Those are our rights, where we have the right to take and change our government or alter it at our will. Well, the initiative petition to me would be one of those provinces that we could take and move to have a judge removed.
What are some of the rights that people do have?
Whew. Having read the Declaration of Rights a number of times, I do have a few of them here. Let me read off the paper. They're pretty well general because you don't want them to be specific. Article 4, the people of this Commonwealth have the sole and exclusive right of governing themselves as free, sovereign, and an independent state, and do for hereafter shall exercise and enjoy every power, jurisdiction, and right which is not or may not heretofore be expressly delegated to the Congress. So if we have certain rights that we contain within our state, we get to use and exercise those. Which troubles me about this initiative petition. I don't see where we're banned of that right of changing the government. We're the sole delegates. How does an article or an amendment take away that right? If it doesn't say that Article 4 of the Declarations of Rights has now been nullified by Article 48 in the manner of judges. It doesn't say that. All power shall reside originally in the people under Article 5. Article 6, no man or corporation or association of men have title to obtain advantages and particular exclusive privileges distinct from those of the community. I mean, yet we have judges that are running courts as they're like their own little fiefdoms. I mean, it's insane. Government, under Article 7 of the Declaration of Rights, government is instituted for the common good, for the protection, prosperity, and happiness of the people. Well, if you're not happy with a judge, how do you get rid of them? You do a bill of address? Well, Joe knows what happens to bills of address. They just get swallowed up by the State House. But yet, under the initiative petition, it'd almost be like saying, Hector, that the people would not have had the right to submit the Declaration of Independence unless the Massachusetts Attorney General approved it and the General Court voted on it. That's how insane it's gotten.
Sounds somewhat absurd, yeah. If I just may point out as well, the problem with the judges, as you just very adequately explained, is that once a judge is put into his position in Massachusetts, he's there for life. And it's very hard, as you say, to get rid of him. Massachusetts is only one of 3 states nationwide that have virtually no way to either review a judge's performance or to elect them in the beginning. The other 2 states, I believe, are New Hampshire and maybe Connecticut or maybe Rhode Island.
Chief Scott in Holyoke, Massachusetts, submitted an initiative petition to have a recall on judges, a recertification.
Recertification now. Yeah.
Every 6 years, the people get to vote on a judge. I heard on the radio where 2 years ago it had been approved by the voters, but the General Court refused to vote on it.
Right.
And it just died. All that work that he went through was just wasted.
Well, we also see how the people's votes get ignored. I mean, in 2004, I believe there was a ballot, 84% of the constituents in Massachusetts wanted shared parenting. And it brings up the subject because shared parenting, there is a conflict of interest with the judges, as you guys are stating, to prevent shared parenting in the court systems. Why is that? Don't children have the right to have both parents involved in their lives regardless of judges being having immunity, whether there's conflict of interest? Don't a child have that right? Doesn't an adult, a parent, have that right under the Constitution to be a parent?
Well, you've stated it all. Yes, they do have that right, but for some reason, the judges refuse to protect the rights of the children and refuse to protect the rights of the parents. I mean, the best scenario is one big happy family. Well, if there's a divorce, the best scenario is shared parenting. You want to keep the people together, the family together as much as you can, even though there is a divorce in progress. People, you know, what is it? It takes a village to raise a child? Well, somebody should talk to the judges and say, it takes a family to raise children too.
Right, before the village comes the family, which I think,
Yeah.
I think that whole idea was that the family was not as important as the greater village. So there is a flaw in that. It takes a village to raise them.
Yeah, but the children can't be raised by the village unless there's a family.
Right, right.
And if a village is good, wouldn't a family be a little bit better?
Right, right. I think the problem with the problem that's being faced by those who support shared parenting is that you have the courts, in my opinion, are much too, the tentacles of the court, of the government by way of the courts are much too enmeshed in what happens in the family. The courts have to be taken out of the family as much as possible. Now, of course, there are instances where the government and the courts are going to be involved in the family. But as it is now, as we see with restraining orders, the least acrimony that comes up in a personal situation immediately is said to be resolved in a public institution, i.e. the courts. It's totally absurd, it's totally ridiculous. The court should be the most removed from the family life as possible. Whether it's possible to do that in every instance all the time, I don't think so. But the way they are now in getting everyone's personal situation immediately into courts only benefits the Bar Association and the legal industry. There's no other reason for it, no other reason whatsoever.
What would be the incentives for them to go against their oath of office to protect the Constitution?
It's called billable hours. It's the lawyer's favorite phrase. How much of their time is going to be billable to the clients? Everything is billable, from scratching down the telephone number on the pad when they take the case to having a 2-minute conversation. It's all billable hours. It's about the money. And that, in my opinion, is supported by the ideology that underlies all this, which is that the family structure is something that is not thought of as having any value these days. And the most prominent feature of the family structure historically has been the father and the man. And so that has ideologically, there's been an attack on that for the last 30 to 40 years.
How would you like to see the Governor's Council operate?
Well, I'd like to see the Governor's Council a lot more transparent than it is now, and a lot more devolving to the local areas where people are going to be placed in positions of judgeships. I'd like to see a lot more vetting of people. I'm in favor of looking at these nominees as to how they approach these questions of a conflict between, for example, a person's due process rights and a statutory law, such as the restraining order, which on its face is unconstitutional, but yet the judges by law are mandated to enforce it. Well, they have discretion. They can either enforce it 100%, 110%, even though it's unconstitutional, or they could use their discretion to say, well, look, this really doesn't meet what's needed here. We're going to toss this out. This complaint is frivolous. Most ROs, in our opinion, as the Fatherhood Coalition, are either frivolous or false. And so most ROs should be quashed and not even considered.
And when you say ROs, you're talking about short word for restraining orders.
Restraining orders, right.
Okay. Now, restraining orders was brought up on our last show with the two attorneys, and they discussed that these restraining orders stay in a particular database with no chance of ever being removed. So my question is, if these restraining orders basically are being abused with frivolous claims.
Frivolous and false.
Yeah, false information in some cases. Is it constitutional for them to keep your name if you haven't been convicted of a crime to be kept on a particular database?
Well, I've asked to have my Corey record removed because the two Stoughton police officers who arrested me pled the Fifth. How can you be under arrest if the police who arrested you are pleading the Fifth to their actions under color of law? I've posed that to many attorneys, and the silence is deafening. But I have asked Governor Deval Patrick, I says, Governor, you know, swipe of a pen, law of the land. Just expunge all those people who have arrest records with no convictions or restraining orders where the charges were later dropped or something like that. And the silence is scaring me. Hector, it's as if the government does not correct mistakes.
Well, if I could, John, I think part of the problem and the reason behind that is the government officials, such as the governor, they're still in the 1970s and 1980s mindset, where they think the general population actually supports these unconstitutional laws. I think they're going to be in for an awakening. As the general populace is awakening, so will the leadership. And as soon as they realize that, they're going to...
No, I hope so. I mean, as you stated, you know, they swore an oath to uphold the Constitution. Well, the Constitution has certain principles that they are to uphold. My question is, and I've asked, what constitutional function is performed by the retention of a name on a database where no crime ever occurred? And again, the silence is deaf. I'm talking to professional people, the governor, his associates, the attorney generals. Well, what constitutional function is performed by my name being on a database where the police admitted they committed a crime by pleading the Fifth? Their names aren't on it, my name is. And people who have restraining orders, I know a gentleman, because he had a restraining order, got married again a second time, his new wife's authorizations to work in certain facilities was denied because of his restraining order, which had been dismissed.
Yeah, it's out of control. It's a system too big. One of my favorite organizations, the name that I like the best is downsize.org. The basic premise of it is government is way too big. Problems like this are a result of a government out of control. There's no way to resolve it. Devolution of power is the order of the day, generally across the board, for a lot of problems we face in the country.
So when we were growing up, we were led to believe that government worked for the people. Who does government work? Who does government work for now?
Basically, I've been a real bear about this, but it appears that government works for itself. There are more people now working for government than for private employers.
Right.
And each one of those government workers gets a pension that the private workers may never see. And their taxes will have to pay for the pensioned workers. And I've asked people, well, where in the Constitution does it say that a public servant deserves a pension upon retirement? And there is no answer. And I mean, this is where I'd love to see every American have a tax-free savings account. You save to your own pension fund, you invest the manner that you want to, you take it wherever you go, and invest the first day that you put it in.
And more importantly, you have control over it.
You have control over it.
Because this is the crux of the matter. Control over assets and resources is now firmly in the government's grip, or in addition to the government employees that you're talking about, the special interests that are working hand in glove with the government, such as the
pension people lobby for the government gets bigger, the bigger the government hires more pension people, they lobby. This is the only thing that's growing, Hector.
And it's growing and it's getting bigger.
Private corporations, I saw Bethlehem Steel. When I was at Bethlehem Steel, they shut it down. It's dead. It's gone. The one in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Just want to remind the viewers, if you have a topic that you want us to ask questions for you of your legal officials, email the show at the Hector Montalvo Show @yahoo.com, or you can visit the website at behindthescenes.weebly.com. Gentlemen, we have a few minutes left on the show. Can you just tell us what you would like to see change? What type of changes would you like to see?
Oh, Lord. I've been a big bug about having the cameras in the courtrooms. The courthouse is the only place that you or I or anybody who's watching this show stand equal to government. We are exercising our rights against some government statute or something. And of course, rights should supersede any statute that blocks or infringes our rights. But we don't get to see what's going on in the courtrooms. And if we can take and fix the courts so that they work for us instead of against us, I think very simply, and I'm a cheap guy, if we just get some cameras in the courtrooms, I think that would be a very big step to educating.
And Joe?
I have to agree with Don on that score and say that I think that it's going to be fixing the court system is one of the biggest obstacles we face. Devolution of political power from the federal government to the state to the local entities as much as possible is our goal. And as I said, personally, I'm running as a candidate for the Governor's Council in District 1. I didn't mention it before, but I'll just mention my website, which is votejoeureneck.com. So if there's anyone out there in District 1, Southern Massachusetts, or if you know people in Southern Massachusetts, please encourage them to vote for me in September. The reason I'm running is to encourage this type of political activity, devolution of power to the local entities as much as possible.
Well, I want to thank all of you for coming in, taking the time to come in and discuss these important issues. And I want to thank the viewers for watching. I want to thank MCTV and all the crew members who are truly the brains behind this show. Watch us next time here at Behind the Scenes.